so far I've shown you two of the families, tops and sops, and Greg is going to do chops and dats in a bit. But now's a good point to show you components, which are the first tab in the upgrade dialog. And these are inherently very different than the other nodes. So let's just create a base component. So it looks very boring. There's nothing in there, and there's not even really many parameters. But what this does is this is how we create a hierarchy in TouchDesigner, or a folder structure similar to a folder structure. So right now I have this base one, and you see that we have this address bar up here. It's kind of like in Windows when you see this. Where's Windows? So when you look at computer, you have C drive, and then you have folders like users, Greg. This is where we are, derivative. This is your path to a certain location, right? A certain folder where you're holding whatever you want to hold in there. So we have the same thing in TouchDesigner in your project. This is the very root, the very top of your project. And then we have been inside project one the whole time we've been working. So by adding this base here, I have now added something called base one, which we can go inside by just pressing enter, going inside. So now we have a new network that we can start a new idea, a new project, or whatever. So you can see up here in the address bar, you have project one now and then base. This is just like Windows for navigating, so you can click on project one to go back to it. Or I can click on this slash and see what's available to me, and oh, I see base one is there. I'll click on that and go inside it. So you can navigate from this address bar, but you can also navigate using keyboard shortcuts. So if I want to go into this, I have it selected. I can, so in is I, and you jump in. And if I want to go up a level, I can press U for up. So I and U. You can also press enter, and we have no other key for up, so just U. You can also double click on it. There's a few ways. They've been added over the years. There's also one more way. If you have a scroll wheel on your mouse, this is what we call the ZUI, or the zoomable UI, and you can zoom in, and at a certain point, it'll take you in. It'll just snap you in there. And then you can zoom out, and at a certain point with the scroll wheel, it'll zoom you out. So so let's go all the way up another level. We're in project one right now. There is a root, or a very top level, which is this slash, or you can press this little house to go to the root. And this is the default TouchDesigner setup. Project one is where we were working all morning, and these are stuff that derivative puts in here. These orange ones cannot be deleted. They're system components that hold important things. I'll show you how to use perform mode later today. So we can go inside, and why might you want to have a component? Well, we can put different things in there, like we can make an effect. So if we maybe make get another movie. So if we open the upgrade dialog and get a movie file in, you can have the banana is fine, or if you want to grab a movie from the media folder we gave you, just grab something. Okay. Now let's say I want to make this. I want to make a special effect component, like a plugin, basically. I'm going to call this Edge Effects. Okay. So I'm going to pass this, any image I want, movie, into this, and then do some effects on it, and then pass it back out. So let's go into Edge Effects. I'm just going to double click on it, but we have a new network to work on here. So to get things in and out of components, we have two operators called the in and the out. And we have this for every operator family. So in tops, if you create the purple tops, select them and look for in. Okay. And then I'm going to right-click on the output and then select find an out. Okay. So what this has done for us is we now have an in and an out inside. And if I press U to go back up a level, you'll see my component now has purple connectors. So we can now connect any other top operator to this. Okay. So I'm going to do that. I'm just going to connect my movie into that first input. Okay. Now this is a good time to also show you how we can use the workspace in a different way. All day we've been working just with one pane, one sort of a network editor. But up here we have pane layouts. And we can split the pane into 4 or 3 or whatever separate panes. So let's select the second one, which is a horizontal vertical split. So now I have 2 separate workspaces. Right? This is similar to Cinema 4D or Maya or any 3D app where you have like 4 different workspaces and they're all doing different things. So on the right side, I want to go inside Edge Effects. So now I can work on the inside and see the result on the outside. So on the right-hand side, I'm inside Project 1 Edge Effects, yeah. And on the left-hand side, I'm just up at Project 1. And if you don't have it split like this, the pane layout is right here. You can do this through this button. So these I just put an in and an out and just connected them like this. And then on the outside, there's a purple connector now on this on the side of it. So now what we're going to do is we're just going to isolate all our effects inside this component called Edge Effects. So right in line here, let's add our start adding our effects. We're going to add an edge. Use an edge top. It should be right in line. Okay, so what it's doing is it's getting an edge for us, yeah. But let's select the edge and look for this comp over input parameter. If you want to change the color of the edge from that, we can make it a little yellow. Yeah, there we go. And then we can add another thing after the edge. Let's do a color adjustment. We'll right-click on the output and select HSV Adjust. You type in HSV and you will find it in the second column in the middle. And HSV Adjust allows us to control or change the hue, the saturation, and the value. So I'm going to change the hue. There we go. Okay. So that's all I really wanted to do is just do a couple of effects in there in a separate area to keep everything clean. And I'm going to save my work now. Control S. Now I want to close this side here now. I don't need to see it anymore, so we can go back to the full size. In the upper right corner of every pane, you'll see a down arrow, which has pane options. So this down arrow allows you to either split the pane or duplicate it or close it. And in this case, I want to close it. So I'll just redo that. And using this down arrow, I could also have done what I did with the buttons up here. I could split it left and right. So I split it left and right, and I get 2. All right, and I can split it up and down, top and bottom, and I get this split again. So you can make the workspace any way you want it, and then save it like that. You could say add new layout, and you can save this for later. And it's kind of like making your own personal workspace. Again, I don't need this, so I'm just going to hit the arrow and close them. Hit the arrow and close them. And I'm back to just my one network editor. Let's go up to find some nodes to do that. If I wanted to do that here, I will actually take all of these here, these whole 4, actually, and I'll put a null at the end just so we can see the output still. Null, yeah. And I'll take all those 4 just by box selecting, right click. And then if I click somewhere else in the network editor and say collapse selected. It makes it into a base. You can name it whatever you want. And if I go inside, I see that little network that we had.
Just copy and paste it, or just create some kind of
Yeah, copy and paste, right?
So then, if I then change the internals of one of those pasted,
No, they're fully different and unique, and you're multiplying the memory, and yeah. See, there are ways of making it so that you can change one and they all change. Yeah, I'm going to show you that this afternoon. It's called cloning, and we can have one that's like a master, and then the rest of them are just cloned. So.
And if I want to see the output of the collapsed ones, I add a null?
Yeah. This is from the output, yeah, a top output, yeah.
And that's also why you had the movie in file separate from the base?
Yeah, that's what I did it down here. I like that approach. So down here, I was just about to add a null. So I was going to add a null here and call it, final out, or whatever you want to call it. Yeah. And I can see the input and the output here. So it's kind of nice. Now, the other cool thing about components is that these can be encapsulated into an external file. So if I right-click on this, I right-click on the component, it says Save Component. So I can save this, go into the folder, and save it as edgeeffects.tox, save. So tox is now an external file. If I can just find my browser. I don't have a browser. It is now an external file that I can mail to somebody or email or whatever. This is how a lot of people put examples up on the forum. Instead of sending a whole TOE file, you just send the component where you're having a problem, and then people can load it. And it's super small. Like if Windows would get out of my way, 1 kilobyte. These are super tiny, so very easy to send even in a messenger app or something. And whenever you see a TOX, you can just drag and drop it into the network pane, and there you got your TOX again. Instead of having it in a project, I can double-click on it, and it'll open in its own TOE file, and then you could edit it and then save it out again. Here's a good example. For example, let's say I have a chop. Remember the constant chop we used earlier? Let's say I have a constant chop, and you don't need to follow me for this. But I also want to send a constant chop in there for whatever reason. I can go inside, and I can go to chops now, and chops will also have an in and an out. So I put an in chop, okay? And now when I go back up, there's now a green input. So now I can also send in a slider or a mouse value or something. And then inside, I can use this in here. Okay? And this is also a really nice way to keep your networks organized. So let's say you have your inputs over here on the left. I put them here. And then I have a whole bunch of effects. If I just have them all over the place, the network will be huge and very hard to understand when you're just taking a glance, whereas I could have all these effects nicely named and organized into these components and go inside and work on it and keep everything encapsulated. It also makes it much easier to share with somebody if you're all of a sudden like, here, use this effect and send it back to me when you're done. So it also allows multiple people to work on the same project. If I'm building the overall architecture of the project, but Marcus is doing all the effects components, he can be building these in his separate components, and I can just be loading them in when they're ready, and I can be building the architecture, let's say, if we're working together on a project. So it allows multiple users to work together. If I have an error in here, and I put an error in here, I know something is, no, that's not going to
make an error.
I got to make an error. I'll do the comma that you did earlier. So I have an error there inside. If you're up here on this level, it shows you have an error inside it.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I can say, okay, I'm going to go inside. There it is. Fix it.
Yeah.
Reset parameter. It's good now.
Great.
Okay. If you want to read an external file, all components on the common page have external TOX right here. So you can load it. You can load it in from a file. So let's say you're using GitHub or SVN or something like that as your version management. These can all be updating all the time, and then the next time you launch the TOW file, they're all loaded from disk. And that's how we manage multiple people working on big projects and in bigger systems. It doesn't update in the project while it's running unless you do reinit. Yeah, reinit network. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to save here. Now, if I open this dialog and go back to comps, you'll see we have 3 columns, and these are a bit different. In here, it's just all alphabetical, but in components, we have 3 different types of components for different jobs. These other ones are just, they have their own uses. The base one is the most basic, and the other ones we'll get to over time. But the panels is for building control panels. So they all have some unique parameters that are just specific to them. For example, if I take a button and I put it down, I now have a UI interactive button that I can use. So if I turn on the viewer, I can click on it, on and off. Okay. I can also right-click on it and say View, and now I have this little like floating button, a little floating interface. And you'll notice that there's actually a green chop output here. So that means that there's some chop values that want to come out of this button. So I can right-click on that, and let's just put a null down. And you'll see when I click on that, it's changing the value from 0 to 1. Okay. Now the other common one is under panels. There's also a slider. Take slider. This is just like a mixer slider or a MIDI slider. So you can build little UIs here, and again, it also has an output.
Is it also chop? No.
It's also a chop. Yeah, it's also green.
Can you connect to
I want to merge all these together. Let's just insert a merge chop. I'm going to insert a merge chop. You remember the merge SOP? This is a similar concept. It just merges chops together. So now we have a merge, and I'm going to take the output here and merge. So now I have a slider and a button. Okay. So actually, let's copy and paste the button as well. Copy and paste. I want 2 buttons. And I'm going to connect it to the merge as well. Okay. So I just have a few interface elements here. Now what I wanted to do is show you how we can put these into a UI together. And for that, we have another panel component called container. And all it does is contain other panels. So under comp, select container. Now there are a couple of ways of putting the buttons inside a container. So the first way is you'll notice the components also have connectors on the top and the bottom, and this is for parenting or hierarchies. So if I connect these buttons as children to this container, they will go inside it. So let's go to the container and go to the first button. Yeah. And also the second button. It'll start, when you get close to it, it'll snap to it. So as long as you see it, just jump to it, then you can click again and it gets connected. I'll move these down here so you can see them here. There. Okay, so now you only see one button in there, but that's because they're both in the same place. We actually have to position these buttons where we want them in the container space. So I don't mind the first button being there, but let's select the second button, and we'll look at its parameters. And the first page of parameters is called layout, and it's all for laying out these buttons. So I'm going to take the X slider here and move. Oh, there we go. Well, I know they're 50 wide, so let's make X 50. Okay. And then let's get the slider in the mix here too. So we'll just connect the slider like this. And you'll see the slider is now on top of them because it's also in the same position. The bottom left corner is 0, 0. So let's move that slider by selecting it and sliding it over just a bit. No, it'll be 100 over. So now we have these three things. Let's look at our container. I've selected the container now, and it has a width and a height. It's 400 wide, and it's 300 high. Let's just make it 50 high or 100 high, something smaller so it's not so big. And now you can right-click on the container and say View, and you get all your little gadgets that you put together. And now you can interact with these. So we've just added a few little basic buttons and sliders and connected it into one container, which we can then view together. And this could have been the switch that we were doing earlier. Remember how we connected the switch to change the ramps and stuff? This could be switching between that. This could be turning something on and off, such as the fade to black. We can tie all these chop channels to whatever effects we want. You might just say these are all my UI out channels, and it's all in one place. The other way of doing it, I could delete this and have 3 nulls, like this. And you'll have the same data, just different. It really depends on how you're designing your network. So let's forget about that right now. Now, there's another way of putting all of these inside a container. Instead of using these wires, which is one way of doing a hierarchy, sometimes you want everything in one network. You want to be able to see everything as you're designing it. Sometimes you want to hide it away. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to disconnect all these. Disconnect, disconnect, right-click, and disconnect. And the other way of making a hierarchy is selecting them all and putting them inside the container. So I'm going to select them all and use Control X to cut. And then I'm going to go inside the container and Control V to paste. And now if I go back up, you'll see they're laid out the same. They're exactly the same as we laid them out, but now they're all hidden inside. So it's just it's an option. We actually started them only working like this, and then we found that sometimes you want a flat structure, so we added the hierarchy way of working. And they work the same. But if you don't want to see all that stuff here where you're doing your effects, maybe you just hide it inside. If I wanted to, I would do that. Where's the merge? Merge. And now instead of a null, what could I do? I could put an out here, right? An out. And you go 1, 2, 3. And because of this out, when I go up now, I have a little green out on here, right? So now I can put the null there, and this is much cleaner than what I had before with all the stuff here, right? It's all like encapsulated into that component. And I can also send this UI to somebody now because it's a component. I can say save and call this base UI, and I can send that UI to somebody. So that's the advantage of putting it all in one container.
Oops.
So there's one last type of component, which are the 3D objects. But Marcus is going to show us those 3D objects in his example this afternoon, which we're going to do some rendering techniques. But basically, to render a full scene, you need things like a camera and a light and your geometry. So this is where you will get those pieces. So if I put down those 3 items that you need to render a scene, geometry, a light, and a camera, all in this first row here, our first column. I now have the 3 building blocks I need to render a scene. And rendering in Touch is done in tops in real time in our texture operators. So if I go to tops, I'll find a render top. Where is it? Render top. Okay, and you'll see that they're automatically connected because of the defaults, and I'm now rendering this into tops. That's real-time render. So Marcus is going to go into that, and also how we apply materials to these geometries, and how to affect the lights. Like, this is a light which I can now move. I can move the light around the scene. This is just a brief introduction to all these parts, and we're going to be using these parts throughout the whole workshop, so we'll get more familiar with them. And also, if you want to review any of this stuff and see it in more detail, we do have the folder that I gave you has this one called Intro Plus, which has much more detail on working with SOPs, and much more detail about grouping and managing points. Showing you how to copy things in SOPs to make very quick, small animated objects. And also a little render scene down here with materials and stuff that you can just preview. It's all the same things that we've looked at, and you can just dig into that. So, but after doing chops and DATs, we want to start building stuff with you that's more interactive and exciting. These are just the building blocks. So you can save your work. And I think Greg's going to go chops and DATs now. The last 2 families, chops and DATs.